Every civilization believes it is different, until the day it discovers it was exactly the same in the last 250 years. Only 3 major governments have collapsed so violently, so completely, and so rapidly that historians still struggle to explain how it happened. France in 1789, Russia in 1917, Cuba in 1959. 3 nations, 3 cultures, 3 ideologies, 3 collapses, different worlds. Same pattern, and today, right now in 2025, the United States is following the exact same sequence. Not vaguely, not metaphorically. Step by step, stage by stage, pressure by pressure, grievance by grievance, as if America is reading from a script. It's written long before it even existed. Most people refuse to see the pattern until the collapse is already underway. But Frostline Economics is not most people. Our job is to study incentives, history, and the machinery of collapse. Our job is to see what others ignore. And tonight, we're going to show you something that will be very hard to forget. This is the 6-stage pattern of revolution, and why all 6 stages are reappearing in the United States. What a revolution actually is. Frostline DFUNITON. Before we trace the pattern, you need to understand what a revolution actually means. A revolution is not a protest, not a riot, not a political argument, not a controversial election. Those are symptoms. A revolution is when the existing order is no longer considered legitimate, and a new order is created from scratch, usually by force, usually by extremists, usually with consequences far worse than the corruption that triggered it. Revolutions don't explode because the poor are suffering. The poor have suffered for thousands of years without overthrowing anyone. Revolutions ignite when expectations exceed reality. When the middle class, the educated, ambitious, upward-striving group believes the system will never fix itself. That is the real fuse. And history shows that once this fuse lights, the explosion is a matter of when, not if. John F. Kennedy said it simply. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Tonight, we're going to test that quote against 250 years of history. The SIX stage pattern, Frostline MODL, every full scale. Revolution in modern history follows the same 6-stage sequence. Extreme wealth inequality, government corruption, and incompetence. Middle-class collapse and radicalization, loss of faith in institutions. A revolutionary movement gains mass support. The old order collapses, chaos follows. It happened in France. It happened in Russia. It happened in Cuba. Now, we'll walk through each nation in details, showing exactly how predictable the fall was. And then we'll look at America in 2025. Prepare yourself. The parallels are not subtle. France minus 1789, the original modern collapse. How the most advanced nation in Europe collapsed into terror and dictatorship. Late 18th century France was the crown jewel of Europe. Paris was the brain of the continent. Art, architecture, philosophy, literature, everything brilliant passed through France. On the surface, the country looked strong, sophisticated, stable. It looked eternal, but beneath that polished surface, France was cracking. Stage 1, extreme wealth. Inequality. Like France had 27 million. People divided into 3 estates. First estate, clergy owned 10% of land, paid 0 taxes. Second estate, nobility owned 25% of land, paid almost 0 taxes. Third estate, everybody else peasants, shopkeepers, merchants, workers, professionals. 26 million people carrying nearly the entire tax burden for the whole country. 1.5% of France lived in luxury. 98.5% paid for everything. Bread, the core of the French. Diet made up 80 to 90% of a peasant's expenses. When bread prices doubled after a bad harvest, millions simply couldn't eat. Meanwhile, Versailles hosted balls, feasts, and fireworks. The inequality wasn't just numbers. It was humiliation. A government can survive poverty. It cannot survive humiliation. Stage 2, government corruption and ION COMP. TNC King Louis XVI wasn't cruel, but he was weak, indecisive, unable to act. France was drowning in debt from wars including, ironically, helping the United States in the American Revolution. Louis' solution: borrow tax peasants. Cut nothing. Protect privileges. The nobility refused reforms. The clergy refused taxes. The institutions that should have saved the system instead protected themselves. Stage 3. Middle class collapses, and radicalization, the Third Estate, wasn't just peasants. It included lawyers, printers, merchants, intellectuals, the backbone of any functioning nation. These people didn't want revolution. They wanted representation, fairness, reform. When Louis refused them, equality, they defected. They declared themselves the National Assembly. They swore the tennis court oath, vowing not to leave until France had a constitution. This is where revolutions actually begin, when the people who were supposed to stabilize the system turn against it. Stage 4: loss of faith in institution. July 14, 1789. The Bastille fell. The crowd paraded heads on pikes. The monarchy's authority evaporated. The church? Delegitimized. The courts? Ignored the king, a symbol instead of a sovereign. Stage 5: radical movements take over. Moderates and the National Assembly tried to steer the revolution. But moderates don't win revolutions. Radicals do. Robespierre and the Jacobins demanded purity, equality, vengeance. They promised the poor justice and the rich punishment. And because moderates couldn't fix the economy fast enough, the radicals gained momentum. Stage Zach's collapse and TER are January 21, 1793. Louis XVI is executed. His wife follows. Then the terror begins. 40,000 executed. Public guillotines. Accusation equals death. Trials optional. Evidence unnecessary. And who ends the revolution? A military coup. Napoleon. A dictator far more absolute than the king, who lost his head. France proves the rule. Revolutions don't end in freedom. They end in force. Russia, 1917. The empire that imploded, how a 300-year dynasty collapsed in months. Russia looked enormous. Intimidating, immovable, it had a vast military. A massive empire. Centuries of monarchy. But once again, as the 6 stages unfolded on schedule. Stage 1. Extreme Inequality. Peasants equals 80% of the population. Owned nothing. Renting land they could barely survive on. Factory workers in the cities lived in misery. 12 to 14-hour shifts. Exhaustion. Child labor, meanwhile. The Romanovs lived in palaces. Inequality had crossed from unfair to unendurable. Stage 2. Incompetent. Corrupt GOVR. Aaron Eamon Nicholas II believed he ruled by divine right. Feedback from the people parliament, where army didn't matter. When peaceful protesters marched in 1905, soldiers opened fire. Bloody Sunday destroyed any illusion of trust. Then came World War I. Millions died. Entire divisions lacked bullets. Some soldiers fought without rifles. The state looked powerful from a distance, but inside it was hollow. Stage 3, middle class and military 2R. Once the bread riots began, the army refused to fire. They defected. The Duma demanded abdication. Nicholas stepped down. A 300-year dynasty ended faster than a presidential campaign. Stage 4, institutions lose legitimacy. Provisional government tried to fix things, but made the fatal mistake of keeping Russia in World War I. No peace, no food, no legitimacy. Stage 5, organized revolutionary movement, RISS, the Bolsheviks. Led by Lenin, promised peace, land, bread. 3 words more powerful than any political speech. 3 words that moved a nation. Stage 6 collapse and civil war. The Bolsheviks took power in 24 hours. Then came a civil war that killed 10 million. Famine, purges, executions, secret police. Show trials, the monarchy was gone. The freedom promised was gone. A new dictatorship replaced the old one, and it was far more brutal, pattern repeated. Cuba, 1959, the modern blueprint. The revolution that began in paradise and ended in dictatorship, 1950s. Cuba was wealthy by regional standards. Havana glittered with casinos, tourism, music, and money. But again, 3 stages were already in motion. Stage 1, extreme inequal urban wealth, rural poverty. American corporations owned land and infrastructure. Profits fled the island. Stage TWO, corrupt govr, man, T. Batiste, ruled by fear. Courts rigged. Police bought. Opponents tortured. Elections fake. It wasn't governing. It was extraction. Stage 3, middle class radicalization. Castro was a lawyer, educated, articulate, ambitious. He could have joined the elite. Instead, he attacked the Moncada barracks, failed, imprisoned, released, regrouped, corruption. Radicalized the class that should have stabilized Cuba. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions and S brutality backfired. Every act of repression created new supporters for the revolution. Even the United States distanced itself from Batista. When your foreign patron steps away, your days are numbered. Stage 5, organized movement gains support by 1958. Castro's forces spread across the island. Urban networks grew. Soldiers defected. Officers fled. Stage 6 collapse. Indicitorsicha Putista fled with $300 million. Castro arrived in Havana as a liberator. Months later, censorship, executions, nationalization, one-party rule. The revolution replaced corruption with repression. Pattern repeated again. The Frostline reveal, America, 2025, now that you've seen the pattern. Let's apply it piece by piece to the United States, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Stage 1, extreme wealth inequality check. 1,980, top 1% owned 8% of you. Wealth. Today, they own 32%, and the top 0.1% own more than 117 million Americans combined. The symbols of excess are everywhere. Private jets, mega yachts, space flights. Meanwhile, the middle class struggles to buy a home, pay for healthcare, or escape debt. Stage 2, corruption and incompetence check Congress approval. 15%, Supreme Court trust. Falling election confidence. Broken, insider trading in Congress. Rampant lobbyist-written bills. Normal debt exploding. Constant infrastructure aging. Obvious. A government seen as self-serving loses its mandate. Stage 3. Middle class radicalized check. The American dream was a deal. Work hard, get educated, live comfortably. That deal is broken. Student debt crushing. Housing prices insane. Healthcare unaffordable. Wages stagnant. Young people, educated young people, feel cheated. Cheated people radicalize. Stage 4, loss of faith in institutions check half. The country thinks one election was stolen. The other half thinks a riot was a coup. Neither side trusts the same media. Neither side trusts law enforcement. Neither side trusts the courts. Without shared institutions, you don't have a country. You have 2 tribes waiting for a spark. Stage 5, mass movements forming near, not fully there yet, but forming. The left calls for sweeping redistribution. The right calls for strongman authority. Both sides believe the system is broken. Once either side gains structure and momentum, Stage 5 is here. Stage 6, collapse. The outcome, no. One wants revolutions don't begin with superfans. They begin with fractures and legitimacy. If Stage 6 arrives in America, history predicts political violence, not sporadic organized. Supply chains broken. States refusing federal authority. Defections in police and military. Foreign interference. Years of instability. Exceptionalism does not stop physics. France believed it was immune. Russia believed it was eternal. Cuba believed it was stable. They all said, it can't happen here, till it did. The Frostline Economics in America is in stage 4. The historical pattern says stage 5 and 6 can arrive shockingly fast. Maybe America reforms in time. Maybe the middle class recovers. Maybe institutions regain legitimacy. But history doesn't care about maybe. History cares about pressure. If this video opened your eyes to the actual cycle, not the headlines, not the noise, subscribe to Frostline Economics. Because when stage 5 begins, understanding what's happening will no longer be optional. It will be necessary. Frostline Economics, no conspiracies, it's just consequences.